This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
Hi, Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. Are you looking for a beach read this summer? May I suggest your big wireless bill? It's got suspense, mystery, a slightly flat, emotional arc, and a shocking twist where you realize you've been overpaying the entire time. Fortunately, though, Mint's story is better. Every plan, $15 a month. Even unlimited. That's it. Happy ending, zero tears. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
Welcome to Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business. The one that answers why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. This is the most important story in business because it describes the very character and nature of an organization. In each episode of Storylines Live, we feature great storytelling and business experts who can share their expertise on the capital S story so that you can do a better job of sharing your own capital S story. Today, we're honored to have Dr. Pat Ballone with us. And boy, she's multi-talented, crosses many universes of expertise. I'm really excited to have Dr. Pat on today. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She describes herself as a performance optimization consultant. Boy, we're going to dig into that for sure. An executive coach as well, with more than 30 years of guiding high-achieving professionals and athletes to attain their highest level of success. She's developed something called the Performance Intelligence Method, and we're going to dig into that for sure. She works today with executives and leaders to increase productivity, eliminate burnout, and unlock the next level of their performance. A lot of her thoughts have gone and her expertise have gone into her book, which is called Why Are You Sick, Fat, and Tired? And I really do love that title, Dr. Pat. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I am very pleased to be here and glad I was able to entertain you.
Well, very much so. And audience, you're in for a real treat. We're going to have some entertainment in the next 30 minutes or so. So did I miss anything important in your bio that you think our audience would benefit from knowing?
Not really. Yeah, I think you hit on all the strong points, that's there. I've been doing this for, I always say, I said to you when I got on, we're first chit-chatting, I said I'm 71 going on 40. So one of the things I know that's important is I practice what I preach because I can't help somebody if I can't help myself first.
Amen to that. I'm with you. We are on the same page on that for sure. Now, Dr. Pat, we always ask our guests on Storylines Live because we've developed this concept of the capital S story that answers why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. Which of those 4 questions or answers is most important to you right now? And in our preparation for this episode, you said buy. So can you tell our audience a little bit about why that's important to you right now?
Well, I just want to let you know I changed my mind.
Okay, all right, good.
And the reason why I changed my mind because I think it would be great if someone bought from me, but then I thought I would rather have somebody work with me. And since I sent you that, because I think that, and even all the 4 things like buy, work, invest, or partner, to me, it's just like I like to partner with people and collaborate with them because I don't think of when I have a client, I don't think of them as a client. I think of them as part of the team. And because their contribution is just equally as important as my contribution and elevating them. So then you have to be able to work together, and if you can work together, then they buy from you and they invest in themselves. So that's what that's how I came around to this.
I really love the answer because a couple of things that the audience might benefit from knowing. I'm often asked, why did we pick those 4 questions? And we start with the B because so often business leaders are most focused on growing their business, right?
Uh-huh.
Whether it's a large organization and the professional CEO, or they're a founder or whatever. So we start there, right? But to your point, if you look at the B and buy, work, investor partner with you simply as a transaction, you're really missing out, to your point, on the other opportunities. We have a client at Vendilli, Dan Lynch from Lynch Law Group. Dan and I have known each other for years. And Dan always says, every client, a potential friend, every friend, a potential client, which is another way of looking at that concept. And,
Uh-huh.
when we put together the capital S story concept, we wanted to cover all the varieties of interactions you could have. And, for instance, work. If you're growing a company, you need people who are going to get in the boat with you and row in the same direction and be on the same journey with you. So if you're not sharing your story in a way that motivates them, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this in one way or another, because Dr. Pat, this is a big part of the work you do, is helping leaders unlock the potential of their organizations. And of course, if your company requires any kind of investment, whether it's people or capital, you got to share the right story that's going to motivate hearts and minds to work with you. And obviously the same with partnership. At our company, we work with a lot of B2B organizations. And the example I always give is during the pandemic, when supply chains were such an issue, we literally had clients who were supplying other companies, and they didn't have enough material, let's say, to supply three companies or three
Uh-huh.
best customers. And how do you decide which one or one and a half to supply, right? And for a lot of these folks, it was the relationship, kind of what you're talking about here.
Uh-huh.
It's like the story leads people to get to know each other and they get to trust each other, and then they have that relationship, right? And I'm sure
Uh-huh.
that's a lot of your work too. Okay, audience, you hear me talk about my version of storytelling all the time. I really want to know, Dr. Pat, how do you view storytelling?
Oh, all sorts of things because I always think that, my mentor was very Irish and he could tell stories all night long without going to sleep. And he always had something that was related to something and I always used to say to him like, "Wow, you know more people than God." And I said to him one day, I bet you don't know anybody in outer space. He goes, "Oh, actually, I do." And there was always that connection. And he always had a story about something. But
Mhm.
stories are so important because it illustrates to people without having to try. Because if you can paint the picture for them, 65% of people are very visual, and then 33% are auditory, and then only 5 are kinesthetic, and that's how they learn. So if you can paint this picture for them, and that could be, and since I deal with so many people in a day when I'm filling in for a doctor, I've got to, and some of them I don't even know. So when I first meet them, my bedside manner's got to be really crisp. And also, and also engaging them. A lot of times when I first went to recently help this doctor who I'm going to talk about earlier, we were laughing so loud in the room. He kept on saying, "What do you laugh about in there?" And I said, "Everything." and, and it was just because people like need that uplifting and it's not so like solemn, like, bridge over troubled waters all the time.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, that's awesome, Dr. Pat. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because you've had such an interesting professional journey, and I'm sure our audience has caught on when you're talking about being with patients. You're not only an executive coach and an author, you're also practicing. So what's your story, Dr. Pat? Uh, Give our audience a sense of who you are and how you wound up doing what you're doing.
well, I'll start at the end and work backwards. My consulting and coaching practice evolved out of over 30 plus years of clinical and performance work. My final transformation came through for executive coaching when I would run into people who their needs weren't being met. They didn't have a systematic approach, or like their interventions that they were doing were not integrated. So they were like, had the box over here that I'm exercising or I'm doing like this over here, but they didn't have an integration of how to create the family, the work, and be able to have it all, like, and so that what your intention and how your outcome comes is involving all aspects of your life. They're trying to compartmentalize them. And the more you compartmentalize them, the more you become disentangled from them. And so, and I personally had an experience way back when I had my business, because I started out my business. I bought a practice for 20 grand and I sold it in the mid 6 digits, just under the middle part of it. And what happened is that I had no clue what I was doing. So I never said no to anybody. If someone was in pain, they got in my office, within 24 hours. And I still do that today. If someone called up, if they said I'm in pain, I'm like immediately on my feet, ready to go. Let's get this handled now, because the more you let it sit, the more adhesions and the more inflammation people have, which makes it even worse, and then they're thinking this doesn't work. When in actual, it's just like the system doesn't work. So what I happened from my firsthand experience, by the time I ended 10 years of doing that, I ended up being the burnt out person, and I sold my business, which was a bad mistake at that time. Looking back at it, it wasn't the right thing to do, but I did it and I moved on, and I moved to Boston from Cape Cod, and I had started a coaching business. After I finished working, the universe was going to get me, and I was nailed by a snowboarder on a ski slope, and I didn't work for probably 8 years, but I had the time of my life though at that time. It's just like, well, I let something else fill that up, because I modeled when I was in Boston. I had the life of Riley. I got to meet really important people. I met Walter Cronkite more than one time. I had a friend who was a very good friend of his that I just talked to him, and which proved the middle seat theory of the you never know who you're sitting next to. He would sit on the bike with me in the morning. And I said, well, he said, I'm going to be in the back bay today. And he goes, meet me at the Ritz-Carlton. He goes, I'll buy you a drink. And I went, okay. So I went in and I'm sitting there, and his name was Max. I said, Max, look over there. CBS, and he just looks around. And he goes, hey, Walter, you old goat, what the heck are you doing here? And this guy, Walter Cocker, turned around and said to him, Max, what are you doing? And he goes, I thought you didn't work anymore. And I said, he doesn't. And we all laughed, but that was one of the ways that I just met people like that all the time when I was in Boston. So it was great in that personal experience on my off time. But, it's just like what happened was I always, when I was in the gym, because the people where I worked out at was right across the street from the financial district in Boston. They were all high achievers. Every piece of equipment at 6 o'clock in the morning was used. As soon as that place opened, people were on them. And I started talking to people in there, and, they're going, well, what do you do? And I said, well, right now I'm not working. I had an injury. And I said, but, I have experience in the health related industry. Why do you do what you're doing? Do you know you have really bad posture when you do that? And I said, if you exercise the distortion gets stronger. And I had these conversations with people, and they started going like, can you help me with something? It's just like, you've got such a good eye. And then people would sit next to me on the next bike, and they would say, what do you see? And that's how I really started getting involved with like talking to more, people who were very driven, very solution driven, and they had to be on a phone, like, at 7:05 in the morning, and they had to get their 5 miles in, take a shower and get out of there. And so they go, how can you do it better? And I said, you can start earlier. So, I mean, because you can only run so fast on a mile. It only takes you so fast to take a shower, and if you got to have suit and tie on and be across the street, you got to like give the 60, foot, or 60 floor building time for the elevators to come down and pick you up. There's only it's times prescribed in some of those cases. But what I found out is that a lot of these people didn't pay attention to the fallout. They didn't pay attention, and they didn't realize how expensive it was financially, physically, and relationally, And so when I had that's how I ended up there doing that and recovering from that. That's the system I wish I would have had my career like way before, because I probably would not have sold my business then.
Wow, Dr. Pat, that is really fascinating. What I love about it is your personal journey, which you've now turned into a business helping others, as you described, is an evolution, right? And one of the things that we talk about a lot on Storylines Live and that we do in our work at Vendilli is help business leaders understand that every leader's story is a journey. And if you want to think of it that way, it may have chapters, right? So what you've just described are the chapters that led you to where you are today. What you were doing in the beginning, the transformational experience, right? And what led you to go down the path that you've gone to today at developing your systems and your processes and writing your book. It's really great content and really great information that I think our audience will really benefit from. And in fact, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to dig in with Dr. Pat to make sure that all of us don't find ourselves sick, fat, and tired. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Hi, folks. Thanks for sticking with us. In this episode of Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business, we're honored to have Dr. Pat Ballone with us. And she's not only practicing, she is an expert who's developed her own methodology of helping athletes and high performance executives and practitioners achieve their best results. Dr. Pat, who are you working with today? And you give us an example of somebody that you're helping.
Well, I can tell you the most powerful version of my story plays out in someone else's practice. And I stepped into a chiropractic practice to help a doctor who's been running this practice at a loss for, he says, for 4 years. And when I looked at the books, and it was by far longer than 4 years. But he always had a reason why that was happening. He owned this practice actually he's owned it for more than 35 years, and he's nearly written off all the value that he's ever built into it when I got there. So he thought an idea might be is that he might want to convey it to me. And I said, it's not conveyable. You have to have something to convey. And there's nothing to convey here right now. And the patient volume was 80 patient visits a week. He was using the same integrated approach that he's always used and using the same systems that he's always used. And so therefore he was getting the same results that he always got. So when I came in and I integrated some systems in his office, I had increased the performance strategy, the mindset of the core business, and the operational alignment. And we grew the patient visits to 140 patient visits a week average. Right now, we're at 158 patient visits a week, where we were at that marker of 80 before. The revenue jumped by 45% in 1 year, and the patients became so loyal that they started saying to him that if I leave, they go. They're coming with me,
Wow.
which made him feel very uncomfortable. And, I told him, I said, don't worry, I'm not opening up next to you, and I said, so, in this case, this isn't a wellness case. This is a business transformation story. And it's exactly what I love to bring to executives and people, even athletes and high performers, is to create that system that's measurable, trackable. And even when you're looking at this, like the starting point of what looks like, oh my God, this is never going to work. Because I always like those practices in those situations where it's like, oh, wow, there's so much possibility in here. They're not seeing it. It's right in front of them and they're not seeing it, or they're lazy, and so I don't just give my clients and even my patients like that type of advice that I only do what I do with people if I've done it myself. I have to have lived it and proven it for myself. And that's how the performance intelligence method came about. And it was built from inside out, not from outside in.
I love that. So can you give the audience a sense of what that system is?
For every person is different. If I take the example of this office, when I first went in there, all I did for 1 week is just sit there and watch everybody work. And then, I started looking at the systems that they already had there, the software that they had, the, electronic record systems that they had, what the front desk person was communicating, who that front desk person, when I did numbers on that, I told the doctor, I said, for every person she's not rescheduling, it's costing you $1,500. And,
Wow.
and he just looked at me and he goes, how'd you get that number? And I said, it's very easy. I said, let's do the math. And so I go, because numbers count. Numbers you can track. Some are something that are tangible and you can put your finger on. You can see them. You can see on a scale of whether or not they're going up or down. And you can see whether or not you're in momentum going up or you are in danger going down. And then when you're in the third danger drop down from that, you've got big problems. And that kept on happening repetitiously. And, we first started getting more, patient visits, and then we started collecting more money. And when we went into 2025, we went in super strong. It was his first time he's did 30,000 in a month, I think, probably in years. And that was net. And then at the end of the year, he was, living in that glory because he had this extra money that he had, and he stopped paying attention. He went back into his old habits. So we did not go into 2026 strong. And when he was doing that, like the mother in me wanted to go say, like, don't do that. You're going to pay for it. And all I said to him, I said, decisions that you're making now have consequences in 2026. And so, his collections for January were only 12,000 compared to 30. And that's a big hit for our business. Right now, since I stepped back up into the scenario, we're only 4.5% away from where we were at last year as of June 1st. And and I said, you just got, and people they want to know, they're like, how long is this going to take? And that communication's so crucial, and it's a lot better than it was. It's still working. And also it was firing the front desk person, which I had pleasure in doing. She drove me crazy.
Who was not rescheduling.
Oh, not rescheduling people. Well, they didn't want to come back. They couldn't do it this week. I said, well, how are you following up with them? Well, they'll call back when they're ready. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. and, and I found somebody who actually her right side, left side was working, and she's going like, you guys got a big problem in insurance. I said, I already know that. And I said, I just haven't been able to get that far yet. So what I thought was going to take 7-8 months to do has turned into maybe 12. 13, 14, something like that. And I'm still here, but I promised myself I was not going to freeze to death up here in upstate New York this year, going into this winter. So I'm, so we have it on the market for sale. It's priced to sell. It's not priced to make a big profit, but it's priced to sell, and we're moving forward with that. So
that's great. That's great. Now, can you give the audience a sense of some of the other kinds of professionals you work with or athletes?
Yes, I've worked with the Kenyan runners didn't cross paths with them more than once. And I was, since, what you put in your mouth is so important. Because if you have brain fog, look at what you're putting in your mouth. If you're being tired 2 hours after you eat, look at what you're putting in your mouth. What you eat is crucial. And eating the right foods for you, because it could be a little different per person, then you have to make those adjustments. But, I've I did a lot of Boston Marathon, and I ran into the Kenyan runners on Cape Cod. I was at the finish line. And when those guys came across on an 81-degree day, they weren't sweating after running 6 or 10 miles. I can't remember what the race was. And my girlfriend used to house them. And I said, can you introduce me to them? And she said, sure. What do you want to talk about? And I said, I want to know what they eat. And she goes, come over when they eat dinner. They eat dinner exactly at the same time. Come over a half hour before. And that's what I did. So I got to, meet them. It's like, why do you guys eat this? And that's how they train. They train so that what they're eating is crucially as important as how much exercise they're doing. And then having the right shoes and having, the right frame of mind. So the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, which also ultimately helps the financial aspect of that. So I worked with them. I worked the first, this is great. This is a kind of funny story. The first Special Olympics in Massachusetts, which was held at Harvard. And it was so beautiful to see the last kid go across because he got a roaring ovation from everybody. It was so great. And they were so motivated. I even got, invited to get married to one of the kids that was there that hurt himself. And he said, you can fix my leg anytime. He was so cute. And I worked at LPGA. My father was a scratch golfer. My uncle was a scratch golfer. I played golf since I was 11. So going into sports medicine for me was like a natural, piece. And, and I like to bike a lot. So I worked the women's pro volleyball games, the men's pro volleyball games. the windsurfing championship, which was really fun because you got your feet in the sand, you got paid for it. And so it was great.
Well, that's a great job.
And things like that. And I used to volunteer at the hospitals because they had education programs, and and I also worked a lot of freebie type things for women who were in transition, who were looking for their next career or a career, and so I would work those types of events also, and then little kids too, and the
Yeah.
Cape Cod Valley,
Yeah.
and a lot of anything that was sports related when I was down there. I never said no to a good invite.
There you go. Well, now I got to stop you right there because I hear from our audience sometimes. What do Kenyan runners eat?
It's a secret. You got to contact me.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Well, I think the audience can tell that you enjoy what you do, but I always ask this question. I think it's important when we have guests on Storylines Live. What brings you the most satisfaction in your work?
Wow, there's a lot of things, but I like seeing people elevate. I like when I'm talking to somebody, if I'm coaching them online, and you can see that light bulb go off.
Hmm.
When, I had a woman, she said to me once, she goes, I just really want to be married. And I said, well, you like the idea of married. That's why it's okay for you to live out in California and your husband to live in Maryland. And she just went, you got a point there. And because that's what worked, that in her head, that's what worked for her, and but she wanted to have that that intimate connection, but she wasn't getting it in her situation. So she asked me, because I love to write, I love to write copy. And so she showed me her 5-page letter she wrote him. And I said, he's never going to read it. And you got to get rid of the first 5 sentences. And I said, here's what to put for the first sentence. Here's what to put the second one, and the third one, the fourth one. I said, if you really want him to get on a plane and get out there, and I said, you have to invite him. And I thought, and the only other thing that's important for you in writing this letter, and she said, is what? Because she was thinking, this is work for me. I said, I
Yeah.
know, but how old is he when he gets upset? Before I finished and took a breath, she said 10. I said, then you have to write that letter to somebody who's stuck at the age of 10 when they get upset, so that they can hear you, see you, feel you, and be able to give you back something that you're asking for.
Wow, that's profound. That's put a pin in that, Dr. Pat, for sure. Okay, last big question is as we get to the end of our time together. Why'd you write the book?
Oh, why I wrote that book? It was so like, this guy, was in Boston, and my girlfriend, who was a vice president of some insurance company at the time, she was in Boston at this seminar type thing. And
Mhm.
I worked for her suddenly, and I had a ticket to go into the venue. I was waiting for her. And there was this woman there that there was a guy who was like a hand reader for the palm, and she said, you should go see the girl across from him. She needs to talk to you. She goes, you'll tell her, she needs to set her life in a different direction. And so
Mm.
he told her some drastic news, and all that came true. And when she ended up in this venue across from him, her face was stone cold gray white. And so I said, you can't give him that much power. You need to get in that line. You need to tell him what he told you and what came true, because your lines in your hands change. When I was in graduating, I was such a driven person. I was finished with clinic 3 months before everybody else was. So I studied like a medieval, diagnosis, and
Wow.
anything that related stuff like that. So, which also included like palm reading, right? So I, my girlfriend, I said, she's not going to, should be a half hour. I'm going to sit down with this guy. And I just sold my business, and I just moved to Boston, and I was, going like, wow, I'm ready to have a great fun life for a while and not have to get up at 4:30 in the morning. And he said, let me see your hands. And he looked at my hands and he goes, lady, I don't know who you are, but your days of healing 1-to-1 are over. And that was the first thing he said to me, and he had my attention 175%. And I said, where do you see that, And he told me I was gonna write a book, and I went, I don't think so. I'm retired. I'm not gonna do that now. And so, I woke up in the middle of the night about 6 months later, and I went, I've got to write this book. I was so driven to write it. I started looking and doing research. So I looked at all my old assessments that were medically proven, scientifically driven, and I started putting them together. together, and I put them, because a lot of the verbiage in there, people would always ask me, what does this mean? What does this mean? How come it says this over here? I don't understand that. So I made it so anybody who's at least 11 years old could understand it. And that's how I wrote the
That's
book.
great.
And
That's a great.
I was walking through Boston, and my biggest observation in Boston, because I live in Cape Cod where you have like sunny breezes, and there's no pollution. And to being in Boston, there's like people, a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I would walk up to people and go, are you okay? And they would look at me and go like, no, I'm having a bad day. And it's just like, why don't you sit down and have some water? What's going on? And nobody asked me what I did. This is in Boston. Nobody ever asked me, are you a doctor? Are you this, or anything? And it was such an interesting thing. When I read the study from the CDC, that it was like in 2010 or 2012, that out of 2,500 participants, all of them had traces of toxic chemicals in their blood and urine. All of them. All the chemicals that they tested for were there in their blood and urine. And I went, oh my God, no wonder people can't think anymore, and they're not feeling well, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And
Sure.
I decided to take my book that I wrote and help people get their foundation, because most people don't know where their basic foundation is. It's like, okay, so what can we do to restore the foundation? Because if you have good foundation, when stress happens or when crap hits the fan, your body, you can respond to it better, and you can make better decisions, and you can survive. You can not only survive, you can elevate. And that's what's really important. So that's how that book kind of came about. And then I started writing it, and then the next part of it came, and it was just really simple. I made it as simple as possible, so that it was a non-brainer. You can do it on, New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, going, okay, here's my health goals. Let me figure out how to get them. And there's ways in that book that you can reach out to me at no charge and saying, what do these numbers mean anyway? I mean, what is this in relationship to this? And I'm happy to explain that to people.
Well, that's a great segue for us, Dr. Pat. What's the best way for our audience to reach you?
Well, one of the best ways is my scheduling link, which is meetdrpat.as.me and /Health Team Network, which is HTN. That's where you can book an executive performance strategy session with me directly. I'm also on LinkedIn. That's how we met originally. And so it's spelled, if you look on linkedin.com /that IN thing / and just my name, Dr. Pat Ballone, no punctuation, I will definitely come up. And that's the most, and I welcome the opportunity to have the connections, if anything resonated with anybody here today, to take that, up level it to the next level and to see where the gaps are, see how we can integrate better. And it's the best way to have a real conversation.
Well, speaking of real conversation, Dr. Pat, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us. And audience, I really appreciate your time as always. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, and share. Storylines Live is the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business. The one that answers why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. And we are honored to have you in our audience. Dr. Pat, we've been honored to have you on as a guest in this episode. We'll see you next time on Storylines Live.
Bye.
Best thing that's ever happened to you financially. Go.
Easy. Sold my car on Carvana. Amazing offer.
Really? I hit 200 on the scratcher.
Did the scratcher come to your house and hand you a check?
No.
How many scratchers did you hit to get that? I hit a button on Carvana.com once.
Okay, that's fair.
It's like the lottery, except you always win.
Not like the lottery at all, actually.
Exactly. Inexplicably good. Offers worth bragging about. Sell your car today on Carvana. Pickup fees may apply.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.